This is Tax Pro Nation, the home of independent tax professionals. Find community, maximize your earnings, and live life on your own terms. I'm your host, Jeff Dolan, Vice President of Pronto Tax School.
And I'm your co-host, Andy Fry, founder and CEO of Pronto Tax School. My grandfather started Pronto Income Tax in Los Angeles back in 1965. My father and I carried on the family business and became tax business entrepreneurs. I launched Pronto Tax School because I know that given the right training and tools, you too can experience the freedom the tax business can offer. I grew up with a dad who wasn't working all the time, who had time to spend with his 5 children, who could take us to the beach on a Tuesday if that's what he wanted to do. The tax business can be an ideal business for people who want that kind of freedom, but it's got to be done purposefully in order to work that way.
And that's why we're here, to help you navigate your journey as an independent tax professional. Don't do it alone. Join the nation. Let's jump in. Welcome to episode 12, where we will be speaking with our guest, Sean Ahlum, an experienced executive who has a wealth of knowledge on how to succeed inside larger companies as an intrapreneur. Sean serves as both Senior Director of Innovation for Castlebranch, one of the top 10 employment screening and compliance management companies in the nation, and Senior Director of tekMountain, the Southeast's premier innovation center for incubating and accelerating startups. We are here this morning at tekMountain on a beautiful day in Wilmington, North Carolina. It is our pleasure to welcome Sean to the show. Good morning, Sean.
Hey, good morning, guys.
Good morning, Andy.
Good morning, everybody. I'm here with 2 of my favorite intrapreneurs, as well as good friends. Really excited about this conversation. And as we were preparing for this episode, I actually think this topic of being an intrapreneur, even if you're an employee or you're working at a company, I think it could be the key to so many of our listeners really being able to grow their tax business. So whenever I think of the idea of intrapreneur, Sean's the person that I think of the most. So definitely excited to get underway on this episode.
Cool.
That's a really nice way of introducing me. I usually just think of myself as a disruptor in an organization, but from what I've learned over a period of time, disruption comes in 2 forms. There's proactive and purposeful disruption, and then there's destructive disruption, and I think I'm more of the former. So lots of lessons learned along that path, though.
Cool. Awesome.
And were you at some time on the other side of that fence and felt like just disrupting for the sake of disrupting, or why is that one of the first things that come to your mind when you think about this topic?
Yeah, it's a really good question because, I think as you grow up and as you age and mature in anything that you do, you gain a little bit more experience, and with experience comes wisdom, and with wisdom comes perspective, right? And so I think there's times where you should be disruptive, and it's with purpose and done in a way that is inclusive and furthers your business in a positive way. And then I think that there's times when you just want to be disruptive for disruptive sake. I don't know, our mic check, I did the Beastie Boys, right? And so it was just kind of funny. I started to think about punk and how that was so disruptive to the music scene. And, the original people who did punk, their music wasn't popular at that time. It was against the status quo, and people kind of bristled against it in the beginning. And then when they took that disruption and they refined it and they added the nuances of things like jazz and then the upcoming hip hop and really started to put in like classical rock and all those other types of pieces to it, it became this really beautiful, accepted kind of art form that then changed the face of the music scene. And I don't think you can have one without the other. So I think you need to go through that period of disruptive disruption for the sake of the conversation and to get to that progressive disruption. So it's just an interesting conversation.
So let's talk about that, because I think for me, it's a struggle because if you're an intrapreneur, you're working in an existing structure, right? And you're trying to innovate inside of that structure. And when I think of, somebody like the Beastie Boys or a band like them, they are entrepreneurial, they're entrepreneurs, right? So they were kind of outside of a corporate structure. So how do you balance innovation inside of an existing structure where they're trying to make you comply and do what they've established as their vision and way of doing business?
In a former life, I went and got an MFA in creative writing, thinking that I was going to be the next, Ernest Hemingway or John Krakauer or somebody like that. And certainly my talent doesn't, reside in writing novels for people to mass consume. But, I was always kind of disruptive in my writing, like lack of punctuation or fragment sentences or switching voice and tone at whim and whimsy. And there's actually this guy, Kevin Canty, whose brother was the lead drummer of this band Fugazi, but he was a writer and he was head of the program. And he said, Sean, you can't break the rules until you know what the rules are. And so I think in a business situation, if you kind of think about understanding the corporate values, the corporate policy and procedure, and understanding all the nuances of the business, it's not really right to break the rules until you understand what the rules are. And so I think you have to kind of have a good baseline. So, for me, it was an MBA, gave me a baseline in business, and now I can understand how to apply. And, there's a different set of rules for being an entrepreneur in the world. So a la Steve Blank, lean startup methodology, and all those types of things, now made famous by Eric Ries and other people. But if you think about how you bring that stuff into a corporate environment, it's not so much that I know what the rules are, like how to start up a startup business. It's how do I sell that within my organization, and how do I get buy-in, and then how do I slowly change the tide? I always talk about a company being a large steamship like the Titanic with a very tiny little rudder, right? So it doesn't turn very fast. How do you extend your rudder, and how do you throw a few oars over the left side to kind of get the ship to turn a little bit quicker? So I think you have to know what the rules and the corporate culture and the values of that corporation are before you can actually start to disrupt those things.
So I think that's an awesome, wide-ranging. I'm sure to our listeners, a lot of those concepts might even be new. And so let me pull back for a second and just say why I think this topic of intrapreneurship and being an intrapreneur is so crucial for our industry specifically and for our listeners. So majority of our independent tax professional listeners and also our Pronto Tax School members that we serve, so the audience that we serve, is mostly smaller offices and smaller companies between about 1 and 4 people. Now, when you have a company that is has hundreds of employees like Castlebranch, the company that you're talking about, and has a corporate culture that maybe has been more codified and more talked about what it is. But even if you're in a smaller company, there's still a culture, an existing culture. And even when you're part of a team of, say, 3 people, disrupting that culture improperly or unnecessarily or not, without a good purpose can be even more damaging. So I think the point that you're making is such a good one of understanding the company that you're working at and what the values are, what the history is, all those kind of things as a part of starting your entrepreneurial journey. But as a tax business owner, we just wanted to make sure, we're talking about the activation step of getting started in your business and your career. And we want to make clear that this is not only for the business owner, it's for the employee, it's for the admin assistant at that small office. It's for anybody that wants to be involved in this industry. And so that's why we're really excited for Sean to bring his perspective, because this is something that if you're the leader of that small company and you want your employees to act more, sell more, to be more involved in marketing, all that kind of stuff, you need to build that entrepreneurial culture. And that's what Sean's going to be able to tell us how he did that and how he's still doing it currently. So maybe you can give some background, Sean, of we're here in tekMountain, so that's tekMountain. Tell us generally, for people that don't know, what is tekMountain and what makes it special?
tekMountain's the greatest place on earth. No, if you're a business person, it's a kind of a welcome respite from everyday cube land, I guess. What tekMountain really is it's the innovation center for our company, Castlebranch. Again, you guys did a wonderful explanation that we're one of the nation's top 10 background providing companies in the nation. But our company knew that it was acting in a commoditized marketplace. We were very transactional in nature, selling background checks. Background check is a background check is a background check. Andy, you want to sell one for $5 less than I'm selling it for? Certainly, you're going to start stealing my market share. So we knew we needed to bring something new and inventive to the product and to the industry. When you get to our size, you start hiring people to be operationally minded. You have a lot of customers and you have a lot of requirements to those customers, and you need to deliver on what you promise. I mean, that's the hallmark of a great company. You provide more than what the person was expecting when they entered into the relationship with you. We knew that at some point we started to see some competition in a marketplace that we defined to begin with, and it just... the only way to do that was have some defensible IP in the space. And so we tried to innovate from within. But, if you're an operational person, you're not trained to think outside the box, or you don't have the time. Even like our really creative engineering department, every time they would try to create new technology, we would just get really busy, and they would have to go back to the business of creating and servicing the products and services that we already had in the marketplace. And so our CEO and founder, Brett Martin, very visionary person, forward-thinking, moving forward in his mind all the time at a rate that most people can't comprehend, decided that he was going to bring what he called at the time an incubator accelerator to Southeastern North Carolina. Number one, nobody here knew what that was. Number two, they were like in Wilmington, North Carolina, really? And but he said, yeah, and he followed through. And I had the pleasure of coming on board in 2014 as the director of tekMountain, and we created something really special here. And what we look at it is it's a sandbox for business people to have the freedom to create new products and services. First and foremost, we serve Castlebranch. So Castlebranch is our major client, and we bring principles like lean startup innovation into the corporate environment, into the company. But in order to do that, we knew we needed to surround our executives with entrepreneurs. So if you think about the idea of behavioral economics, if I want to know who you are, I'm going to go out and look at the 5 people that you spend 99% of your time with, and you're going to be some kind of amalgamation of that time. If you want to be a great surfer, you're going to hang out with really good surfers. You want to be a great musician, you're going to hang out with really great musicians. And what we wanted to do is we wanted to be really good entrepreneur, really great entrepreneurial company. So we knew we needed to hang out with entrepreneurs. They just didn't exist here in Southeastern North Carolina. So what we said is we're going to open up our doors to entrepreneurial activity. And we started with 2 companies. And now we have over 40 in our space with 200 entrepreneurial co-workers, major companies represented from healthcare to high tech. We have members of SAS and Cisco working in our space, and IBM working out of our space. And, it just creates this beautiful melting pot for people to bring great ideas together, and our company to try new ideas and bring new product to market.
Are you somewhere in your tax career and feeling lost with what to do next? Do you sometimes wish you had a map to show you your next step to reach your full potential as a tax professional? Here at Pronto Tax School, we have developed that guide. We call it the Pronto Path, and we want to share it with you for free. Go to taxpronation.com/path right now.
One of my favorite quotes is like a Nietzsche quote of the object of work is to recover the seriousness of a child at play. And so when you say that idea of a sandbox for entrepreneurs, that's what I feel like when I come in, even if I'm wearing shorts or something like I am today and tennis shoes. I feel like when I get here, I want to get to work. And if I see somebody else playing in their sandbox, it inspires me to get more excited about being here. So I definitely appreciate it. One of the things I noticed when I first got here was that, Brett, the CEO, has really been, like you said, a visionary entrepreneur in his own right. His office is right among the coworkers, and I was like, "Wow, that's in your office as well." You got, a lot of your senior management team of Castlebranch is right in with tekMountain and coworkers. Why did you guys think that was important to set it up like that?
Yeah, again, it goes back to proximity. You can't be in this ivory tower sitting above everything else and expect to understand. We have a complete open door policy here. So if you walk into the executive side of tekMountain, what you'll see is that there's the Castlebranch executive side. You'll see that there's coworkers mingling. You'll see that we have all our doors are garage doors, and the mass majority of those garage doors are open. We have garage doors because in America, you build a business in a garage, right? So we want everybody to get that true American business entrepreneurial experience. But again, it goes back to that, hey, we're mixing people together and we're all learning from each other. And it's not just that Castlebranch is taking from the entrepreneurial community. The entrepreneurs are learning from Castlebranch too. There's a couple of things I've seen in the success and failure of startup companies. And the success rate is that companies that are startup companies need to learn the rigor of a fully functional, like enterprise type company. And until they get that into their mind and put that into their perspective, they're not going to grow and scale at the rate that they need to grow and scale in order to afford the lifestyle and the freedoms that we're talking about. And so, and the big companies, they can't be afraid of taking that entrepreneurial risk and giving a place and a safe place for these startups, because you can't hold your startup business idea in the same regard as you hold your core product and service. Because if you hold a startup to ROI, it's never going to measure up and you're going to kill it every time. So you have to really shift your thinking about what is it. So, there's innovation accounting and all those great things that are out there that you can learn about. But, really you got to get into this culture of being a learning organization and create a place where psychological trust and safety exists. Because if your team is not able to have that psychological trust to be able to fail, and fail in a safe way where, they don't feel like they're going to be let go and they have to go home the next day, and on
the contrary, they're respected for doing something like that, right?
That's right.
And is that how it seems like that's how Brett and your team has made it, and it's been a big part of why this has continued to grow.
Yeah, it's been pretty incredible. So out of our company came this idea for this company that was a platform as a service, and so we started talking about our company as a platform as a service. We gave it the room and breadth and chance to grow, and now we went to market with a product called CB Bridges, which is a platform as a service. True SaaS revenue model type of company, manages nursing students from enrollment all the way into employment through their clinical rotational experience, and all the nuances that are in that really complicated career pathway. And then what we do from there is we take the best of all these ideas, and you don't always succeed the first time. And if you don't keep going and learn from your failures, you're not going to progress as a company. And so we embrace that culture, and we actually give it a safe place to live. And that's what tekMountain is.
You mentioned something interesting, innovative accounting. Can you explain that a little bit more?
Yeah, so innovation accounting is a concept where you have to kind of rethink. And so most business decisions are made with core products. And if I make an investment in this, I'm going to get, if I make $100, I need to at least get $101 back, right? Because it's not worth me doing it if I'm only going to get $99 because I'm losing money, right? So it's the cash flow statement, it's the accounting process. In innovation accounting, you have to really start thinking about what return on learning is. And then you have to put metrics around how you're learning, because a startup idea is not going to have any kind of cash flow. You're going to be dumping a ton of cash into your startup, right? So
tell me about it.
Yeah, and at some point, it's an investment in the future. And so, the people who are doing it really well in corporations typically have a cash flow source coming from a core product and service. So they have cut like a little bit of that accounting out, so that's going to be their growth capital, and then that's their burn, that's their runway, et cetera. But then they put metrics on the learnings that are happening in their startup company. Okay, do we do product development through customer discovery? Have we talked to 100 customers? Are they validating our market? What is our unique value proposition? Is that value proposition like actually coming through? All right, now that I have identified my value proposition and my target customer profile, and they're starting to give me some feedback, all right, what does my product actually look like? What are the features? And I'm not going to spend all this money building out the complete perfect. So I'm going to apply some Pareto's principle, 80-20%, right? What are the 20% of features that are going to drive 80% of revenue? Or who are the 20% of my customer base that are going to drive my 80%? And you start using those metrics to start driving your business forward. And as long as you continue to hit those, you have to be really ruthless here. Is this idea succeeding, or is it failing? Am I going to kill or promote it to the next stage? Kill or promote it to the next stage? And you have to come back to that on a regular basis, but you can't expect the money you're putting into it to come back with a 22% IRR, right? So it's just not going to work that way short term. You got to look at it's a long term game in that sense.
Right. Yeah, you mentioned unique selling proposition or unique value proposition. What are some examples that you've seen here at tekMountain of successful USPs? And maybe what is tekMountain's to start?
So I read a Harvard Business Review article the other day that said people who run co-working spaces are not in the business of co-working. They're in the business of happiness creation. I love that. So if I can hold myself to being in the unique selling proposition of providing people happiness, how can you go wrong with that?
Well, especially entrepreneurs, because so much of the time we feel like we're stressed out, like we don't have that guaranteed next paycheck. So it is kind of like a happy space. A space to keep going, and so that kind of makes sense. Actually, good job, Harvard.
My favorite is the idea room. I mean, you can't beat that. I mean, your wife does meditation classes in there. We have a massage chair in there. I mean, it's amazing.
Yeah, the idea room is a really great idea. All good artists borrow, great artists steal, or something like that.
Oh, yeah.
So we
Austin Kleon.
Yeah, we definitely traveled the world and looked at a lot of different innovation spaces, and a lot of these ideas are our interpretation of all the other ones that we saw as we traveled through North America and beyond. Selling proposition is. There's so many different ones because we operate in different ways. So in some sense, we're corporate venture capitalists. In some ways, we're high-end research and development. And then in other ways, we are this safe space for entrepreneurs to grow and network and build their business. And so there's three very different arms of what tekMountain really does. And so each one has its own defined value prop over a period of time. I would say for the entrepreneurs in our space, the value proposition is access to networks, access to core entrepreneurial educational materials and learnings, and then access to potentially capital. As we develop avenues and relationships with venture capitalists for our company and angel investors and private equity people, what we do is we bring those relationships back to the people in the space, and they benefit from that too. And while we don't provide core boot camp style education, we provide an rich environment where people learn from each other, where they can network with one another, and they can start to grow their business in ways that they never realized that they could. So,
and I think the unique part of it, so the unique selling proposition, and again, bringing it back to our customers, let's say you're starting out new in the tax business. You're thinking like, how can I be unique? Because like anybody can do taxes, or there's so many people that do taxes. The uniqueness of what you just said and what tekMountain brings to some degree was based upon there really was not a place in this area or this geographic. This isn't Silicon Valley. This isn't how to have the pedigree of a lot of places like that.
So much nicer though.
Yeah,
it's gorgeous. I mean, it's got a lot going for it. But you know what I mean? It's kind of got a reputation of a beach town or a college town, a surfing town, and that would seem to contrast, right, with like a fast-paced, high-tech, entrepreneurial place. But that was unique what was brought to the situation. And when did you come on to tekMountain relative to when it started?
So tekMountain opened in June of 2014, and I was actively recruited July, August, and made my decision in September 2014, and then sort of worked for the company up until my last day of my other position, which was October 2014, and have been in the position ever since. One of the things is if you're going to innovate, you should innovate in competitive white spaces. So what are the spaces that your competitors are not in, something that will add value to the marketplace that nobody else is looking at? And certainly spaces like this existed in other parts of the United States, but I think one of the things that we had the foresight to see is that this is at the point in time where the millennial workforce was hitting the marketplace pretty heavily, that products and services like GoToMeeting and WebEx and BlueJeans and, Join Me and all of these other really great kind of web conferencing materials were coming out. The remote workforce was like in full strength and starting to come, and people are choosing lifestyle over work locations. And so we know that we have beautiful coastal areas, historic downtown here, educated workforce ripe for the picking in the place with a great major university right here and one of the strongest community colleges in the area. People are choosing Cape Fear for a lot of different reasons. And those people were lonely and needed a place to come. And, we find that most entrepreneurs don't fail because their product is undercapitalized or their idea is bad. They fail because they're not right up top in their head. They don't have the mindset or the mental strength of success, and they're lonely, and loneliness breeds, like, people just fail when they're lonely, and not fail in the good way that you fail and you move on. You fail and you get depressed and you don't do anything. And working out at coffee shops and not having that like inner collision moment where you're starting to bounce ideas off of one another and growing and getting stronger, that's what we brought to the area. And we opened our doors in June of 2014 with 2 companies. By January of 2015, we had to open up this whole second side. And now the proof is in the pudding.
Are you thinking about getting into the tax business, but not sure where to start? Maybe you're not even sure the tax business is the right fit for you, and you don't want to invest a lot of money or time quite yet. You just want to get a taste of tax knowledge and see if you like it. Or maybe you're an experienced tax pro and you see someone else in your world who needs an introduction to the tax business, but you don't have time to teach all the basics. If either of those situations sound familiar to you, you need to check out the Pronto Tax School Basic Income Tax course today. It's fun, entertaining, and gets you a real IRS credential. Go to taxpronation.com/basic to find out more. So let's bring it back to, I'm working for a small independent tax company, right? I've been doing it a few years. I got a few tax seasons under my belt, and I'm trying to figure out, how do I do this activation step in my career? How do I find my unique selling proposition inside of my company, maybe inside of my town and my city? How am I trying to figure out and test where my white space is? And how do I navigate that? Can you kind of explain a little bit, when you were first starting to build tekMountain, how did you figure out what your USP was, and how did you test that? And how did you kind of get started in trying to figure out where is your white space?
So if you notice, we didn't open up both sides and furnish both sides and do everything all at once, right? So we didn't jump all in with both feet. We did in a figurative sense. We were totally committed to the process, but we didn't capitalize out that whole area. We didn't drop the cash into it until we knew what we were going to do. And what we did is we started small and we created these hypotheses. We believe this. All right, well, what are all the things that would kill that high hypothesis? Let's go test each one of them. Which is the most critical one that'll, out of all of these little factors that make up this hypothesis, which is the one that if you don't do, the whole thing comes tumbling down, and test that one first. And then test the next one, and test the next one, and test the next one. And we went through that process multiple times. And again, it's like kill or promote at every one of those stages. If it's not working, kill it, move on to something else, because you just don't have the time or the capital or the resources to keep it moving forward. So just, again, everybody thinks that starting a business is like this act of magic. And in some sense it is. I'm an intrapreneur because, I just never could figure out what that one thing was, is that I was super passionate about, or, I was willing to drop all my life savings and just jump into it, and this is how I'm going to do it. So I'm an intrapreneur, right? So I'm doing all this within the confines. Now, certainly, my whole world is tied to the success and failure of what I do. So it's literally no different. It's just a psychological step, right?
That's a good point.
And so, because every day you have success or failure, and you're going to either bring value to your organization or you're not. And if you're not bringing value to the organization, we cut B players here. We don't cut C and D players. We cut B players. And if you're not an A player, you got to come with your A game every day. What we think about is if you're that small company and you're looking for those things, what is your market? Understand your market persona and profile. So do some of that profiling and persona creation. There's a lot of good tools out there. If you're looking for things to how do I grow my business in this area, or how do I quickly gain users or customers, do a quick Google search on growth hacking and start pulling some of those persona creation templates. There's a lot of that stuff out there in the marketplace right now, and you can find it pretty easily. But then start testing, okay, I believe this. Okay, why do you believe that? All right, what are all the pieces that make that belief? Oh, okay, well, if this one doesn't succeed, then we should scrap it and go with something else. But if it does succeed, what's the next thing you believe about that makes it up? And then just kind of sequentially do that until you get enough. And then go out and talk to your customer base, right? Because your customer base is going to help you define what your product is. So your customers are probably already telling you what your next customer is. I think about this a lot. Some of my most successful entrepreneurs are what I call my baby boomer entrepreneurs, and not to be disrespectful to any other organization or generation that's out there. But the baby boomer entrepreneurs have been the most successful in my mind because they have a 30-year or 25-year career working in an industry. They see the pain point. They've seen it over and over and over again. And then they finally get fed up with it enough that they say, I'm going to fix that. And then they either like roll it out through their existing company or they step out on their own. But the nice thing about these guys is that they all have a network already from their long career. They all have assets that they can put into it. So they're not undercapitalized. And then they have this work ethic that's incredible. Like they come in, they treat it every day like a job. Whether it's 7 to 5, 9 to 5, 8 to 5, whatever, it's routine, it's predictable. Every day I get to see them do it. A couple companies like that we have is Next Gen, which is a flow software, which is a real estate platform for brokers and agents. It's all cloud-based, all comprehensive. So instead of you being a CIO of a real estate company and managing 15 different disparate products to manage one agent and one client, it's all under one company, right? So he's simplifying his stack, what I like to say. And then, another great company is Kevin Small's company with NewLine Loans. He saw that there was a hole in the micro loan area, and specifically in like credit union type banks, that's hard for them to sell those kinds of loans because they're risky, like low dollar loans. And so, but it's good for them to have them on their asset books. And so basically he sells the loan, packages them, and then puts them back into the banks. And I think that's pretty fantastic too. So people that have that kind of vision and that kind of industry experience are really good at entrepreneurship, given the support and the network for them to be able to accomplish that.
So what if you're in a company and your boss doesn't think that innovation is worth investing in? You want to try to go out and test some things and maybe you're not getting the support. How do you navigate and kind of manage up through that process? Can you explain that a little bit? Because
that's exactly what a lot of times is happening in our industry is we're, as tax business owners, there's a lot of inertia. And there's a lot of, well, this has worked for this number of years, and the industry is changing rapidly. And maybe somebody who's even they're not always younger, but they're more entrepreneurial minded.
Sure.
They want to do different things that you might perceive that are risky, or maybe they're not all in on them in the way that Brett was on your venture. So I think that's a great question, is like, how do you do that because a lot of times we're afraid of that social disapproval, or our boss didn't like that. It was my idea and it didn't work out.
It's generational.
How do you think of that?
It's generational too. I mean,
it certainly can be, yeah.
A lot of the leaders of the independent tax businesses are 45 to 65?
Yeah, so tax preparer actually was named by Time Magazine as the not the oldest profession in the world. That's something different, but the percentage with the highest average age.
Yeah, sure.
So, and that's not just to be ageist or say that all people that are over 60, but it is very common that you might have somebody who wants to disrupt, who wants to be entrepreneurial in your company. If you're that person, how do you, like Jeff said, manage up and have that conversation with your boss to get the permission and get the buy-in to do something new?
Yeah, so I'm a big baseball fan, and I'll go back to a baseball analogy, and I'm going to go ahead and talk about the 2008 Phillies because, that's where I come from. And,
all right.
I'm a big Philadelphia sports fan.
That was a great team.
Yeah, man, that was a great team. But really you notice, they only really have one or two big home run hitters in that team, Ryan Howard, and then I think maybe somebody else on that team maybe was like slugging them out of the park. And even those guys were a little bit sporadic in their home run hitting at that point in time. But they hit singles and doubles, and they played small ball so well. They did all the basics so well. And nothing breeds future success like small victories, right? So win this week, win next week. And Charlie Manuel was a great coach, and he coached like that all the time. He's like, do the little things right, do the little things right. go back to football now and the Eagles last year. So I'm going to throw that out there too. Finally, Super Bowl champions. They did all the little things right and they were selfless. Right. So when their backup quarterback was MVP of the Super Bowl. Right. I mean, that's like unheard of in professional sports that kind of stuff happens. And so that means that they are all on board and they have an area, they have psychological trust within their organization. They're not afraid to fail. Everybody's got each other's back. They know that they can fail and then their team is going to be there to support them and they're going to move those things forward. So I think number one is if you're in this situation and you don't think your boss is like very supportive of that, like take some time, work on the psychological trust within your organization. We're talking about 4 people. We can do tons of things. I mean, you can bring in a coach like my wife and they can talk you through those types of things, or you can bring in other people and do some stuff. I mean, there's consultants and coaches and those kinds of things. So, spend some time on team building. So number one, that's the psychological trust and safety is a big part of it. But again, like don't go out and try to hit the home run, go out and say, oh, look, here's this piece in the tax preparer. We're doing it by paper and pencil right now. If we bring this piece of technology to it, we're going to save ourselves this much time, and then put some accounting to it. Say, okay, it takes me 30 hours to do this. I can do it in 5, right? So this is how much I make per hour. This is the cost savings you're going to have over a period of time, and this is how we can scale this out. And this is the revenue gain you'll get, because if you cut expense, you're going to bring in, greater net profit. And so
that's good.
So you got to be able to show value. And so it's really important to have C-level executive buy-in. And when you're doing entrepreneurial activities, so maybe, go out and do small tests. Say, hey, I tried this and I did it on my own time or whatever it is. And look, I found this to be true. And like, if we extrapolate out the numbers, this is what it's going to be. And then I don't care who you are, if you're like 65 years old or you're like 25 years old. If I'm going to tell you that I'm going to make you an extra $150,000 a year because I'm going to do something that's not going to cost you anything, who's not going to do that? I mean, it would be unwise fiduciary move to do something like that. And most good business people who have stayed in business for they make sound like financial decisions. And so I think you got to start small. You have to build the psychological trust with your organization. And then what you have to do is then you have to show small victories. Play small ball, man. Small ball wins championships. And if you can do that, then and you do all the things right, and you're still doing your normal job right, then you're gonna find success.
Well, I think that's exactly it, especially for our crowd, because that's how my dad always was. Well, I was kind of known for, drawing up these like 18-page documents about we're going to build, everybody's going to be part of a sales force and whatever. And I started realizing that his attitude, because you talk about the rigor of a company that's been in business for a while, and part of the rigor is I don't buy into every new idea that comes up because I know 70 to 90% of them don't work. So he would tell me and say, well, let me know when that's working and I'll be on board. And what I started discovering is that when you would take those small actions to try to hit that single of, say, you want to build and turn your technical workers, tax preparers into Salesforce and be more sales oriented, be more involved in marketing. Most tax business owners absolutely want that. The small actions that you can take of like, hey, make 3 calls this week. Make 3 sales calls. For most tax business owners, especially the employees, aren't doing that at all, anything. So before you try to put in like a complex CRM and all these other things that are on my 18-page write-up, why don't you just call 3 people and see if they actually need what you can offer?
Yeah, call 3 people, track it on an Excel spreadsheet, and then like now it's not paper and pencil, it's trackable. You can come back and replicate it over and over again. And then once that starts working, then say, hey, you know what? This is great, and we saved this much money. If we take that savings and we invest it into that CRM system, then we can kind of start realizing more money. But again, it's little steps. No business person wants to drop a lot of money on a lot of expenses that aren't going to show them return in the long term. So you have to kind of, as an entrepreneur, take it on your shoulders and say, okay, I'm going to defray the risk. It's all about risk reward. And you as a person, and actually this is some business advice that I got probably about 3 years ago. There's a point in my time when I was working here that I just wasn't sure if I was the right person for the job. You know what I'm saying? And I believe that every single person that operates in this world is the CEO of company U, right? Like I am the CEO of Sean Ahlum Incorporated every single day. But no CEO operates on their own. You need an advisory council. So I have a group of mentors that I see. I have about 6 of them that I've gone out and cultivated relationships over a period of time. And one of the guys is a pretty savvy investor, and he's an older gentleman, but really smart and has been very successful in his business world. And he looked at me and he said, "Sean, who's your number one investor?" And, I was like, and he's like, profile him, like, what's his investment strategy? What does he like? And, most people who have gotten success don't get that way by giving their money away freely. And so, understand their risk tolerance, understand where they like to invest their money in and how they want to move forward. And if you can do that as an entrepreneur and understand like who your investor is in the company, and you can go ahead and pitch them and show them how their investment is going to earn them return over a period of time, and not like 20-year return period of time. Like we're talking like less than 5-year period of time, because nobody wants their capital tied up for that long. And so how do you do that? And then how do you start to build that up and then apply that to your business? And then, so as you go through your business every day, you think about, okay, my boss is my investor. If I'm going to go in and I'm going to say, hey, I want to improve this process, why is my boss going to buy into that? Is it going to save him money? Is it going to make him more money? Is it going to, you see what I'm saying? And it works. It just works. And so if you think about it that way, it's a really good way to kind of approach the entrepreneurship role. Because just because you work for a company doesn't mean that you have free reign to all the capital in the world. You still have to ask for it. You still have to get it. You still have to utilize it wisely. And you still have to show a return on whatever it is that you get.
Tax pros have seen it coming for years. The entrepreneurial wave is here, and that means more opportunity to do corporation, S-Corp, and LLC business tax returns. With the new tax law, they're even more complex and in demand. Professionals who increase their skill set in this area can expect to become more profitable and successful. Pronto Tax School has the perfect online training course for you called Business Tax Verified with CPA Adam Shea. Find out more at taxpronation.com/business.
For people that are listening to this, and if you're going to share this with your team, say you're which I think will be one of the best uses of this episode, is just to kind of, most people that when they get a job, they think it's the opposite of being an entrepreneur. I have a job, so like how much am I making per hour? And if I show up, I'm going to do it. And I don't realize that in today's economy, nothing could be further from the truth than that. It's just a matter of whether you realize it or not. And that's definitely how it is in the tax business, that the owners look at how much revenue are you going to generate versus what you cost, right? And so just think about the perspective and kind of the attitude that Sean's talking about as being an employee, and contrasting that with sort of the old school attitude of the employee of, I show up, my boss is, like, they're not the same as me. And like in today's economy, it's so competitive. We're all in the same boat. We all have to start thinking more so like that. And I know, Jeff, too, you're an entrepreneur in your own right, as well as an entrepreneur. What do you think of when you hear this kind of perspective that Sean's sharing relative to your adventure here at Pronto Tax School?
Yeah, no, it's absolutely relevant. I mean, the mindset part of it is very key, because I have to think like the owner. I have to think that Andy is my client as much as he is a boss or something else, right? So if I was working as a tax preparer in a company, I am Jeff Dolan Inc. working for this company. And the same skills, if I think like an entrepreneur inside of a company or outside of a company, I'm going to be a lot more successful than if I just think, oh, I have a job and I just need to show up at work, do my job, and go home and not think about it. That's how you get stuck.
Yep.
And so that's how I'm thinking about it. Just how can I show up as an entrepreneur inside of the company? And that mindset is super key, because for years, I was always feeling like, well, I can't do anything innovative, right? Because every time I try, I get shut down. And so you kind of get in this kind of depressive cycle where it's like, well, I asked and they said no. And well, I guess they're not going to listen anymore.
Well, not every company is like Castlebranch that kind of Brett had the vision to start seeing that and moving with that. So I think probably a lot of people feel like that. And there may be even listeners that feel like that in their current job right now.
Right. Yeah. So what advice would you have for those people?
There's one thing that's finite in this world is how much time we're given,
For sure.
And how are you using that time? And I think about this every day. I mean, am I using my time wisely? Am I getting the most value out of my time? And am I enjoying what I do? Because if I don't, then I should be doing something else. I didn't have that mindset 5 years ago, but I live that mindset right now. And I'll tell you what, there's no difference between me coming to work and working here and me being a 1099 employee or owning my own, consultancy firm or anything like that. I mean, I feel the same way every day. I just happen to work inside of a larger organization. And even if I own my own consultancy firm, I have people that I answer to, and I have relationships that I have to manage and those types of things. And so, it's interesting. Everybody's like, oh, I don't work for anybody but myself. Well, you work for your client and your customer every single day. And unless you're showing them value, you're not going to be in business very long. And so those are the things that I think about. So,
oh yeah, I think that's one of the biggest possible misnomers you could ever have is I'm self-employed because I want to be my own boss. And then you realize you have as many bosses as you have customers.
You traded one
you
for
just got
100.
fired yesterday by 3 people.
Yep.
And so you have the opportunity to get fired by 1,000 people rather than one person. So I think that is something that is a huge myth. And I think you're doing a great job of breaking down this myth between you're either an employee or an entrepreneur. And I think for our industry, I'm really excited for our listeners to hear some of this thought process, which it sounds like you didn't always have.
No, not at all. I mean, before this, I was always an entrepreneur and a disruptor, but I didn't think like this all the time. I mean, when you take risk, 2 things happen. You realize how precarious the ledge actually is. And then you get over the butterflies in your stomach and the churning and all those kinds of things that come with that. And you look at how great it is to be tapped into this sense of energy. So I'm a surfer, and when the surf is bigger and I'm paddling out, certainly there's apprehension, and it's a really crazy natural energy, the ocean coming at you in this way. But there's ways that waves work, and it's predictable and tide, and I educate myself and I keep my body in a good shape. But when you paddle over into the wave and you commit to it, and you fully commit without hesitation, and then you stand up and you're weightless and you have this energy moving around you and you're tapped into it, there's this sense of freedom and self-expression and perfection that you want to tap into every day. And if you can tap into that feeling every day when you go to work, because you're making those risks and you're operating from this sense of authenticity and centeredness and those types of things, then you're living a good life, and you're bringing value to the space that you're operating in. And so I think about those pieces of the puzzle when it comes to business too.
And also don't wait for that. No, you don't have to wait until you have your own company to have that.
Certainly not, no.
So one of your tests could be you're testing that with your company, right?
Sure.
You're testing whether you have the freedom to innovate, whether you have somebody that's listening to your ideas, and maybe you're not in the right environment.
Maybe your business owners don't want to hear this, but every employee that works for you, it's not a one-way relationship. It's a two-way relationship. You make a choice to hire them, but they're making a choice to work with you. And so, the employment contract is a two-way thing, and either person can terminate that contract whenever they want, for the most part. And so you have to bring just as much value to your employees and to your other team members as your corporation needs to bring to you. And so when you start looking at it like that, everybody becomes the equal players in the employment relationship, and nobody wants to be in a lopsided relationship.
So what are some things you look for in potential candidates that you hire? Things that you want to avoid, things that you like to see? As an intrapreneur, are you looking for kind of that entrepreneurial mindset in the folks that you hire? Because I know traditionally, in the old way of thinking like an employee, you would be threatened if you hired somebody that was entrepreneurial, that was under you, that was coming up with all these ideas, because, maybe that compromises you as an employee, right?
Sure.
So what do you look for in a candidate? So
I look for people with mental curiosity more than anything else. People that have the desire to learn. I've got a pretty strong academic background, so most of my thought processes start from education and research and discovery. So the R&D part of it is kind of a hallmark of what I bring to the table. So, but I'd look for people who aren't threatened by that. Like, I just want to get through this phase. I want people to come in and say, man, I'm really interested in this. Tell me more about it. Like, explain this to me. And then I'd look for those people who are not afraid to have a voice, that challenge the status quo. So is this something like, why do you do it like this? Or, I don't like people to come in and do it disrespectfully, but I like people that come in and like generally have that curiosity and ask the questions because they are generally interested in learning how the process works or what they can do to improve it. And then sometimes I look for the people who have the mental maturity to know when it's just not worth like innovating on something. Some things just aren't worth innovating on. It's not going to get you a return. So why do it? Just let it go. But some things will. And so being able to know the difference between the two and being able to voice your opinion when you think it matters is really important. Even if it doesn't come to something, it's still important to be able to voice your opinion. I look for people that have had some entrepreneurial or intrapreneurial experience in the past, that have either worked for companies that generally have taken on their like research or the kind of disruption mindset. So to be honest with you, you don't want to hire a bunch of people that are just like you, because then you get this very myopic like view of the world. I truly believe that innovation is bred by diversity. So diversity breeds innovation. And the more diverse your workforce and the more diverse of opinion you have, the more likely you are to bring innovation to the marketplace.
So for somebody that's hearing these thoughts, which I really think that for a lot of people in our audience might be the first time they're hearing it expressed like this. And I want to put you on the spot a little bit because, I always like to do that.
Sure.
I think you like to do that too.
All the time.
I think you've done that to me several times, which I always enjoy. So
getting people out of their comfort zone is a good thing.
Yeah, and I think it leads to some great things. So let's say you're one of our listeners and you're in a tax business, an independent tax business between, say, 1 and 5 team members, right? And you're listening to this conversation and you've enjoyed it. Now, obviously, you haven't been in the tax business yourself and all that, but with the number of businesses that you see and the number of ideas that you roll around in your head on a daily basis, if I was that person and I'm not the boss, okay, I'm an employee, but I really like this idea of being an intrapreneur. With what you know about the tax industry and the changes that we're undergoing, what's like 1 or 2 possibilities that I could take what I'm getting from this conversation and do something in real life in my company that would make a positive difference?
The number one rule of being an intrapreneur is that when you have an idea, you talk about it often and with as many people as you possibly can. But there's some caveats with that. So the first caveat is clearly explain your idea, what you want to do. But then once you tell it to somebody, shut up. Let them tell it to you, let them talk, because, nobody wants to hear know-it-all tell about everything that they know about a subject. It's just not that interesting. And number one way to get somebody interested in something is to ask them for their opinion on it. So, and you can't ask somebody for their opinion if you're going to continue to talk about it. So you got to God gave you 2 eyes, 2 ears, and 1 mouth for a reason. State your idea and then use your ideas, watch their body language, and then listen to what they're telling you, because if you want to hear yourself talk, that's great, but you're not going to get anywhere. So it's really important to do that. And the most important thing is that as you talk to those people, maybe they know other people in their networks. And now all of a sudden your network is expanding by their sphere of influence as well. It's just like real estate. If you want to draw in clients, you look at your sphere of influence and then you try to connect other larger spheres of influence to gain clientele. So if you are going out there, maybe I talked to you, Jeff, about, this idea I have, and you say, well, I don't know know too much about it. It sounds really cool though, but I know my friend over here in this network has got some information and some ideas about that. And then all of a sudden they're connected to 3 or 4 other people. Now all of a sudden you've just exponentially scaled your idea out there, and then you're starting to pull that information back in. You wouldn't have gotten that if you just continued to talk and talk and talk. Nobody wants to hear you talk. They want to know about your idea, and then they want to tell you what they think about your idea. And honestly, if you have to keep telling people about your idea, it's probably not that good, because people just aren't getting it the first time you say it.
And I think that's a great point, because it gives the ability for other people who can make that idea come to life to feel like maybe it's partly their idea too, because they've had some insight on it. And I love that part of it, that you can do that tomorrow. That's your choice to be able to open up your idea, start talking about it, ask questions. It's not something you have to wait on at all. You can do it tomorrow, and it can really help you and your organization. So I think that's a great way to hit that first single.
Yeah, a lot of people also say, well, somebody's going to steal my idea. Well, let me tell you the difference between having a great idea and actually executing it. Like, everybody's had the idea. It's the person that actually executes on it and follows it through and grinds it out every day. Because let me tell you, once you have a business and then you have an idea and you start executing on it, it is a day-to-day grind. It is work, and then you're going to do it, and not everybody is cut out for it. So don't worry about somebody stealing your idea. Go ahead and talk about it, listen to their feedback, and then, and if you might actually learn somebody else has already done it, and that might be the right move for you, is to join with them. And then all of a sudden, there you go. You're in your dream job.
Yeah, it's called activation, because you have to act. So awesome. Well, Sean, it was a pleasure spending this time with you. Really appreciate it. There was a wealth of knowledge shared here. So I hope you as the listeners got a lot out of that. I have been Jeff Dolan.
And I've been Andy Fry. Thank you so much for listening.
All of the show notes for this episode can be found at taxpronation.com/12. We have created an infographic of the Pronto Path so you can see all of the steps in one place. Go ahead and download that at taxpronation.com/12 as well. We hope this episode made your life a little bit easier and more profitable. Join us next Monday as we talk with more of you, our listeners, and share more helpful insights and stories. Take care.